Welcome to Hellbound, a miniseries brought to you by Exeter Cinema Club, looking into the more questionable parts of Clive Barker adaptations. I'm joined by the biggest fan of the Bear Wench Project 2, Carl.
Oh, I love the Bear Wench project too. I wish dildos were real.
Me too, dude. We're both slight fans of Clive Barker. You've been delving into his work over the last few months.
Hmm.
Specifically, I know we're both a big fan of Hellraiser.
Yes. The first Hellraiser movie, one of the greatest movies of all time. At least horror movies.
Yeah, like kind of undeniably one of the most significant horror movies of that period. But it is also a franchise that has spawned a number of very questionable sequels, and that is basically what we're gonna delve into today. We were going to talk about Hellraiser Bloodline, which is the fourth one, which on the surface we thought was going to be fully in space, which would have going to be a fun topic anyway. Turns out that movie has about 20 minutes of stuff in space and not deserving of a full episode for itself. So we're just going to talk about Hellraiser as a franchise because I think we've got a lot to say about some of the individual entries in this series. But yeah, do you want to give us an introduction to Hellraiser, like Hellraiser the first movie, what that's all about?
Yeah, for sure. So Hellraiser, it's based on a novel called The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker. It's about sadomasochism and hell. It's
Pretty
about
much.
a guy who he's exhausted all of the earthly temptations, right? He's had all of the
Yeah.
BDSM sex, and he wants his next like big thing, and he hears about this puzzle box that if you solve it, it'll give you your temptations. Kind of, it'll give you the greatest pleasure. Um,
Mhm.
Sort of a Yu-Gi-Oh puzzle kind of deal. And so he opens it, and it turns out the greatest pleasure is being kidnapped into a kind of semi hell. It depends on which movie we're talking about.
Mhm.
In the first one, it's not really hell.
No.
Like it's BDSM hell, right? Where you're torn apart by chains for all eternity, and your torturers are these really cool guys called the Cenobites. The most famous one that I'm pretty sure everyone listening has seen
Mhm.
is Pinhead, this like white blue guy with a bunch of needles in his face. He's really cool. Yeah, he tortures people. Basically, the movie is about this guy. He opens the box, he gets sent to BDSM torture hell, and he doesn't really like it there, so he tries to escape. He gets his ex lover to kind of kill people for him, and he can drain their power to be reborn. And you also have like the Cenobites are very auxiliary in the first one.
Mhm.
It's more of a like a killing mystery story where this guy he keeps killing people alongside his lover. The lover is married to the dead guy's brother, and the brother's daughter becomes she finds out about this killing stuff going on. She summons the Cenobites by mistake. She barters with them to let her live if she gives them her uncle Frank, who has escaped them. And yeah, they don't really stick to their promise, but she does the puzzle box in reverse and sends them home. And that's the first Hellraiser movie. And it's very good.
Yeah, it is a very good movie. It's super influential for any kind of body horror stuff that is out nowadays, or has been influential in the last 20 years, is because of Hellraiser.
Yeah.
Without Hellraiser, you don't get the specific brand of body horror like Saw is.
Oh, yeah, for
Um,
sure.
there are bits within even some of the later as in the ones we've seen for this podcast, of those sequels that is so obviously influential to Saw and that kind of body horror. Um, and it's also just like Clive Barker, he's a gay man. A lot of his work is very like desire based,
Yes.
and like kind of the more like extreme results of desire, I guess. Like he's very interested in, punishment and torture and the kind of moral collapse that is just in like all of his work besides a few. And yeah, you see that like Hellraiser is like just such a pure example of that. Like
Hmm.
the Cenobites, as you said, they're not even the villains of that movie. They're the ones in control. They're the ones with the authority, but like they're not the villains. The villains are the guys who decide, oh yeah, I'm gonna open this puzzle box. I'm gonna go into temptation, and it's like, yeah, well you came into our house. You've got to like put up with our rules.
Yeah. Yeah. And like as we do this miniseries, we'll probably touch a lot on Clive Barker's specific like
Yeah,
style,
for
right? But
sure, for sure.
uh, yeah, I think one of the things that does set him apart a lot from contemporaries uh, is the fact that he does not shy away at all from these like more sexual
Oh,
uh,
absolutely not.
things.
Yeah.
Like sex is a big thing in horror, right? But it's usually
Mhm.
very surface level. You're punished for having sex, and the virgin survives.
Yeah. Like in Clive Barker stuff, like sex is the punishment as well in a lot of them. Like not even like in a like assault way. It is like your like specific sexual desires are like your punishment. And like that
Yeah.
those desires are like entwined with like other bodily functions and like how like so often in like Clive Barker stuff and like we read books of blood, the books of blood prologue, for this podcast that we'll get into later on, and that has like like sexual gratification and also like emptying of the bowels and stuff. It's
Hmm.
very like specific of like very specific like sexual gratification.
He does not shy away at all from the more gruesome parts of like bodily autonomy,
Hmm.
and it's also like uh, I don't know a whole lot about Clive Barker, right? I've read some of his works, I've watched some of his works. I don't know how much of it has to do with him having a different view on things based
Hmm.
on being a likely sexually repressed homosexual man, right?
Hmm.
Um, but I really love the the I guess the casual way that sex is used. Like it's
Hmm.
very hardcore, right? BDSM and stuff like that.
Absolutely,
But
yeah,
it's also like sex as just a thing that human individuals do.
yeah,
And it's not like because he uses sex as a punishment, right? But he doesn't consider chastity as
uh-huh.
like moral or something like that, right?
No,
He
no,
doesn't see
yeah,
sex as being immoral, but he also has a thing of he more or less always portrays his characters as morally gray at best.
yeah.
Uh, and like we mentioned, the Cenobites aren't the real villains in this movie. Uh, they are more of an external force of nature kind of deal.
Yeah.
The villain in the first Hellraiser movie is a human, right? It's a human guy who kills people to get his body back, and his ex-lover who helps him. And the Cenobites, like, they're not even evil necessarily. Uh, you said like it's our house, you have to play by our rules, and that's true. Like
Yeah.
maybe the box should come with a disclaimer, right? You could make that argument, but
Yeah.
it's also like it's portrayed as at least in the first movie that Pinhead and his gang, they don't like think that they are evil or immoral. They just lack empathy in a way.
Hmm.
For them, the whole sadomasochism hell is a great place.
Yeah.
They love ripping people apart with chains, and they love being ripped apart by chains. It's really nice in that way.
Hmm. And it's not even like they're not punishing the guy because he was immoral. It was literally just, hey, like, yeah, this is our world. If you want to join our world, like, you look forward to chain torture because that's what we do here.
Yeah.
There's no like, are the Cenobites the good guys? Because like there is no morality like that. Yes, there are innocent parties for sure, but like there are no like the Cenobites are absolutely not like the good party. They're not saving the day. Um,
No, absolutely not. Um,
it's they operate in like a very specific way, which I think makes them so scary, but also like so interesting as a force in that universe of like kind of breaking down any kind of morality of this is just how these guys live. Uh, if you want to open the puzzle box and get either summoned into their world or summon them, varies on the movie what actually happens. Um, then they, yeah, like I think, yeah, like playing by their rules is just how it works. But like they have no interest in what like the mortal realm are doing with their like outside of that. But if you want to involve them, like, yeah, well, they've got the final word on how it's going to go.
yes. Yeah, precisely. And that's the big thing, right? It because it's not Christian hell.
Mm-hmm.
It's not where sinners go to be punished.
No.
And they aren't Satan. They don't try and tempt you. Uh, at least in the first movie, they don't
Yeah.
try and tempt you with sweet nothings. They don't try and get you to eat the forbidden apple.
Uh huh.
Uh, they have this vibe that you get in horror movies, oftentimes with these like bestial creatures, like the alien from Alien,
Mm-hmm.
of like this is simply a force of nature. Uh, this is not a moral thing, an ethical thing, right? With other killers like Jason or
Mm-hmm.
Michael, it's often in a like a punishing kind of way, right? Jason, he hates sex. He hates teenagers having sex.
Mm-hmm.
The Cenobites, they just show up, but
Yeah.
they have this extra degree of scariness because the xenomorph, it simply exists. It simply kills. It
Yeah.
cannot be conversed with. It cannot be understood.
Yeah.
Uh, but you can talk to Pinhead
Yeah.
and you can plead to Pinhead, but he won't understand you because
No.
those aren't the rules he plays by.
Uh huh.
Uh, and I think like I've never seen that done in another horror movie or book or franchise.
No, it is very rare for that to be so specifically like the specific role that like the Cenobites play in the first movie specifically, and the second in a way, is just not present in a lot of movies. Like they are they operate by their own rules. We've done it so many times, but like that is exactly how they work.
Yeah,
They're not vengeful, like rarely vengeful anyway. Like we'll get into that. They're not. I mean, like they're evil, but like they're evil by our standards.
precisely.
They're just guys who have certain interests, and they are like, hey, they usually keep to themselves. That's the thing. It's
Yeah. Like when they show up, they're like, the box has been opened. What do you want me to do?
yeah,
And especially in the second movie, when Kirsty opens the box again
yeah.
because she wants to try and save her dad. And Pinhead shows up and she's like, no, don't kill me. And he's like, you keep opening the box and then asking us not to take you. That's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like distinctly like an innocent person opening the box and then like Pinhead being confused of why you open the box.
Yeah, but I think that's also a thing, right? Where it's like Kirsty, she fits the archetype of like an innocent
Mhm,
character. Uh, and at least in the first one, she opens the box unknowingly. But in the second one, she opens the box fully aware that Pinhead is going to come out.
mhm.
Uh, And at that point, it becomes harder to call her like an innocent victim, right? Because there's the read that she should just accept her father as being dead,
Mhm.
which as we keep watching the movie, we see that he he isn't even the one who tried to summon her.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's an interesting thing to play around with as well. I think most of the things that are interesting about Hellraiser 1 and 2 probably stem from the fact that Clive Barker, when he wrote The Hellbound Heart, he wasn't trying to create a horror franchise.
Exactly. Yeah.
He unwittingly created an extremely marketable character in Pinhead, who
Yeah.
has now become contemporary to the likes of Jason and Freddy Krueger and Chucky.
Yeah.
But that's not what his purpose was. And as the movies go on and as Cliver steps back from the directorial role, we do see Pinhead become more of this marketable uh, horror movie killer guy.
Yeah. Because
And
like
that's a shame.
realistically, it is a little hard to write movies or stories in general with the Cenobites in the very specific role they play without just like redoing the same movie. So
Mm-hmm.
I kind of, obviously, there was no need for them to make this many Hellraiser movies. And like when Clive Barker has like retouched on um, Hellraiser stuff, he has done it from like the perspective of Pinhead. But like in terms of making movies with like the horror formula, it is very hard to make them in the same way that Hellraiser One is. Like
Yes.
Hellraiser One just kind of is a complete package of what you do when you've got like kind of like tertiary kind of all powerful demons, and then you have like a like a separate horror movie you could do without the Cenobites in the first one. Um, the Cenobites are just like the all controlling, but like the Cenobites are what gets people to watch the movies. Like they're the main
Uh-huh.
appeal. People want more Cenobites, so like you have to kind of like as you go make them more of like the central force. But then people who don't quite understand the franchise end up making Pinhead the villain, and
Yeah.
it just kind of falls apart. Um, and
Yes, precisely.
I guess we can talk about we kind of talked about Hellraiser 2. The main thing with Hellraiser 2 is that like it kind of introduces more tangible mythos for Pinhead. Like he is a guy. Like he was a human. He was like a Vietnam soldier who
Yeah. All
like
the all the Cenobites were humans.
yeah, all the Cenobites are humans. Pinhead is the one we get like the direct like origin of, which is
Mm-hmm.
it is very odd. Like he's a scene that I think is actually pretty interesting, if not for like the weird kind of mythos questions of he was a Vietnam soldier. He got hold of the box. I can't remember exactly how he gets hold of the box, if it's even mentioned. He has the box. He opens the box. He gets dragged into hell and gets turned into Pinhead. Um,
Yes.
and then he is carrying out the will of the Cenobites, I guess.
It's difficult, right? How have you rewatched the second one recently?
Not recently, no.
Yeah. Uh so essentially they go to the Cenobite hell in the second one, right?
Yeah.
And and this is actually really cool. There's like this eldritch entity, this like
Oh yeah.
huge spinning uh object in hell. That's like it's like an Eye of Sauron kind of situation. It's called
Mhm.
Leviathan, and that's like the god of the Cenobites or of hell.
Uh-huh.
But the Cenobites appear to not know that it is their god. The Cenobites don't have any memory or recollection of them being human.
Uh-huh.
Uh, it is a movie that I've gained more of a respect for in retrospect. The second one,
Mhm.
on first watch, I was a bit disappointed. I felt like they were doing a lot of predictable and easy things with the mythos.
Yeah,
The Cenobites being human originally seems like something that every franchise would have done,
yeah.
right?
And the Cenobites
Uh,
being human never really means much outside of Hellraiser 3, which again we'll get to. Cenobites being humans is never like that important. Because going
yes,
forward, yes, I think it kind of explains why Pinhead might have a bit more empathy, um, but that's kind of irrelevant. Going forward, he could easily just be demon without any kind of human roots, and it be like it worked totally the same. In in the vacuum of the second one, it's like okay, I kind of see where it's going, but I don't necessarily get it, you know?
I understand it from the perspective of like in the second one, they still have this kind of auxiliary position in the story. They aren't front and center. They aren't the most important part, right? The main villain of the second movie is like the super mega Cenobite who says all the surgeon one-liners.
Yeah.
Uh, and so like Pinhead dies in the second one, and I
Yeah.
don't think Clive planned on bringing him back.
No. I don't think he planned for any more or more Hellraiser.
Yeah. So as like a last hurrah, like here's the info you want about the Cenobites. Here's a way for them to be more like more something you can empathize with, and also like flesh in some mythos about the most liked character of the first movie.
Yeah.
From that perspective, I understand it, and also from the perspective of Clive Barker directed a movie. It turned out to be a massive hit, and he only had 1 year to write the script for the next one.
Yeah, that is
From that
true.
perspective, I also understand it.
No, yeah,
Uh,
that definitely makes sense.
the downfall of Hellraiser uh, does not happen with the second one.
No.
The second one
Hellraiser
is a good
3.
movie. The second one had me hopeful, right?
Mhm.
I think if Barker had remained in the driver's seat, maybe we could have gotten something better. But also, I think that the thing that I think people have to keep in mind, right, is that when writers write stories that appear to have a deeper mythos, they don't always know that mythos themselves.
Mhm.
Uh, Hellraiser 1 likely wasn't planned to have a continuation. And so having things like the puzzle box, the weird merchant guy who delivers the puzzle box and returns to pick it up and turns into a weird skeleton dragon.
Uh-huh.
I don't think these were things that Clive Barker had planned out in advance what exactly they meant, because not knowing is part of the fun.
Yeah. I think like, a really good comparison to Hellraiser 3 is the Halloween series. Because Halloween, like John Carpenter, he did the first one. That was like a complete movie for him. Then they made Halloween 2, which was a direct continuation. Then Halloween 3 was like the start of them trying to make it an anthology series. Halloween 3 has absolutely nothing to do with Michael Myers. It is like this like Halloween cult. It's a very good movie actually. I recommend people watch it. But like that movie like flopped. At least I believe it flopped, or it performed really badly. So for the fourth one, they were like, "Oh, Michael Myers is back." But like
Mm-hmm.
it's like the start of the franchise like really losing its way of like what made the first movie so interesting. um like it makes it kind of like explains too much, or like is just like kind of too it's like it like takes a direction that doesn't work for like what people like about Halloween. And Hellraiser 3 feels the same. Like Hellraiser 2 is like a good, a good ending point for the Cenobites and Pinhead. Oh, what if Pinhead came back and he was a pillar. He was a statue that wanted to get out of the statue.
It
uh,
was the ugliest pillar.
yeah. What if he was like worryingly smooth? Um,
Oh.
what if Pinhead could turn people into Cenobites? And
What if his makeup was bad?
yeah, what if he was making the funniest faces for the entire movie? Like Hellraiser 3 is like, yeah, it feels very much just like we need to make another one of these movies. People love them. We have no idea what makes these movies tick though. How do we do this? Like Hellraiser again
Hellraiser
could quite
3.
easily have been like they could have quite easily taken another Clive Barker story and done it in a similar way to Hellraiser, and it would have been, you could have had like an anthology series that would have been, just as interesting, but like people want the Cenobites, and when you wrap up the story of the Cenobites, you kind of get stuck.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big thing. Like, I don't want to victim blame, right?
Mhm.
But the fans are to blame for Hellraiser 3 in a way, right?
Oh yeah.
Because the fans are the people who elevated Pinhead to this
Mhm.
like uh to this like place that he became at. Like, he wasn't simply an auxiliary character anymore. He was the face of the franchise, and he was the guy that people wanted action figures of, and he was the guy that nerds
Yeah.
would meet up at conventions and go, do you think Pinhead could beat Jason in a 1v1? Do you think Pinhead could beat Freddy Krueger,
Could
right?
he beat Goku?
Yeah, could he beat Goku? And I think like I wasn't around at the time, right? But I think someone could write a very interesting paper on like that specific era of horror and
Mhm,
how
for sure.
fans were at the time. I don't think
Yeah.
fans were sitting around talking about how we are talking right now about how Hellraiser 1 is really interesting and unique and all of that.
Yeah.
It was all marketing, and it was all how strong can we make Pinhead? How wacky can we make his kills? He
Yeah.
doesn't have any kills in the first or second one.
Yeah. It's like the period that like the Hellraiser sequels came out in, like Hellraiser 3, was a very desperate time for studios because like this is pre-Scream. So like slasher movies are in a weird spot. I know Hellraiser isn't a slasher movie, but it's treated like a slasher movie post
Mm-hmm.
the second one. Um, like the final, like the titled final Elm Street movie had come out, and it's like across the board one of the most like confused movies. Like I actually really like that movie, but it is like it was not enjoyed. Halloween's in a weird spot. Like Friday the 13th is still going somehow. Like these movies were in a very weird spot, and like I think whenever you got like a new villain, like a new like icon, like the Cenobites, like Pinhead, like I'm sure studios were just like so desperate to get more movies with this character because like Wes Craven hadn't made Scream yet. Scream came out the year um Hellraiser 4 came out.
Mm-hmm.
Like like horror was in just such an odd space. It was in real like decline at that point. Like where I can only assume like when the studio was like, oh yeah, we've got Pinhead, like we want to make movies with Pinhead, and it kind of shows when you go through into like the later sequels when Hellraiser became just an IP people used to make their own movies. Like Pinhead is the only thing, like Pinhead and the icon of the box are the only things in those movies that like maintain any element of, oh yeah, this is a Hellraiser movie apparently. Like
Yeah, I'm really excited to get to Hellworld at some point.
Hellworld for people is like one of the later sequels. So Hellraiser 1 through 4, I think they are the only ones that Clive Barker produced. Then Hellraiser
Yes.
5, I think Inferno it's called, is like I think people like that one a lot. It's directed by Scott Derrickson, he did Doctor Strange, he did Sinister. Like he's got credits. Um, I think people like that one, but it's also distinctly the first one where the Cenobites were an afterthought. Like, don't think Pinhead is in it much. And then that kind of set the tone for the next three when a guy called Rick Bota, for some reason, was allowed to make three Hellraiser movies, two in the same year. I'm pretty sure all of them are the exact same, and one of these is Hellworld, where it is just a completely unrelated movie, and at one point for like 2 minutes, Pinhead will show up. And it is like a really desperate point for the series in the 2000s of they had like maybe it's the growing pains of like, oh, we were really desperate to get more Pinhead, oh no, Scream came out. No one cares about, like, specifically cares about these horror villains anymore. We need to do something with this IP. Oh, these people want to make Hellraiser movies. Let's go for it. Um,
Yeah.
like I feel like Doug Bradley, the guy who he's the actor of Pinhead. He must have like signed on for a number of movies because all of the Rick Bota sequels, he is in them, and then after that he was just out. They got a different guy for Pinhead for the last two. Like it's a very fraught time when you look into like the late sequels where the only iconography that would tell you it's a Hellraiser movie is Pinhead is there very briefly, and the box is like in some point a central thing.
Yeah. It's it's telling in a way, right? Because
Hmm.
like Barker, he knew after 4 movies he was checking out. He was working on other things.
Yeah,
Um,
that's like Barker though. Like he doesn't do like he'll either make a long book like he does like Weave World is one of his like favorite books that he's written and it's like super long,
mhm.
or he'll do a selection of short stories like Books of Blood. It's like 5 volumes of Books of Blood and that's like 30 plus short stories, some of which have become like huge franchise, well like not huge franchises but like huge like horror movies like Candyman originated in Books of Blood.
Yeah.
Lesser things like Midnight Meat Train and Rawhead Rex were Books of Blood stories. He's a guy who will much rather just write like little stories and like create little worlds that way rather than dwell on the same one after the other in a different story.
I mean, he's a creative as well, right?
Yeah.
I think at some point it becomes like, are we gonna keep making things just for the sake of
Mm,
income,
sure.
or are we going to, things have to die at some point. I
Yeah.
think 10 movies. That's a good. That's a. You should
Yeah.
be happy that you got to make 10 movies.
Yeah, for sure.
You've spread this franchise for a lot, right? Like,
Mm,
I mean, it's not the MCU, but
no.
it's good.
Yeah. And it's not even as like Hellraiser itself and Hellraiser 2, I would say Hellraiser 2 as well. Like they are like landmark horror movies. Like you can be like satisfied with that alone. Like even if there was two Hellraiser movies, you can be satisfied with that like landmark achievement in horror. It's but
If
yeah, like
like,
to have like
yeah,
8 other movies and like just regardless of the quality of those following movies, like I doubt he was ever like, oh, we need more. And there's like a Hellraiser remake coming out at some point. It seems like he's involved with it. Seems like there's
yeah.
been some like really interesting choices being made. Like I know there's a trans woman playing Pinhead, which I think
Oh,
is
nice.
which I mean like it plays into like Clive Barker's queerness and like the inherent queerness of a lot of like Clive Barker's stuff. And like yeah, I think that there is a lot of hope for like that entity, but this seems like a new thing and not studios using Pinhead because Pinhead sells.
Yeah, it's like, it's the resurgence, right?
Hmm.
It's But I also think the same thing could have happened if they stopped after 4,
Yeah, for sure.
or maybe even 2,
Hmm.
or 1.
Yeah, it's the same with like Candyman. Like there are Candyman sequels, but like who cares? Like Candyman itself
Yeah,
stands so far on its own that you do not need it. And like in both those cases, like yeah, Pinhead has like such incredible screen presence. The Cenobites have great screen presence. Um, Candyman, great screen presence. They and like in the same way that like Freddy Krueger is amazing on screen and like Chucky is amazing on screen, there are ways to like make those characters into have more movies. Like Clive Barker adds a lot of finality, like even if not directly, the stories of the characters in them can like wrap up very easily. um, they're not
yes,
necessarily like villains that will come back again and again in like a like Saturday morning cartoon way, like Chucky and Freddy Krueger are, because they are they're characters who have a lot of like potential for fun ideas or like kills. I think kills is the main thing. Like in a horror movie, is like how many like kills can you get out of a killer, and like for the Cenobites, a lot of it is, I mean, because they add in like, oh yeah, Pinhead can make Cenobites now, which means he can just like kill them in a random way, and it will make a new Cenobite. Um,
Yeah.
that was like screams of like, oh, we desperately need the kills because look at Freddy Krueger, look at like how many like iconic moments he has, like look at like all of the kind of like goofy Chucky kills and stuff that Jason does. Like we need that, and that's why I say like yeah, the series becomes a slasher franchise, even if it isn't in its origination like a slasher franchise. It becomes a slasher franchise. Um,
Yes, it's very clear that uh, they're doing what's popular, right? Uh, or at the very least, what they know is currently selling.
yeah, for sure.
Post the second one, which also like Barker isn't directing it anymore, so you lose his like vision as well.
Hmm.
If I was Barker, I think I would distance myself entirely from the third one. I know he's listed as producer, but
Yeah,
yeah. Should we talk about the third one? Do we have to?
yeah. Let's talk about the third one.
The third
Uh,
one is for sure one of the movies of all time.
it's one of the movies of all time. It's I've certainly been around the block enough times with like bad horror sequels, and certainly now having seen like Hellworld, like bad Hellraiser sequels, that like I was able to have fun with three. But like it is an absolute bastardization of what Hellraiser is, for sure.
Yes.
Um,
I stand by my view that if Hellraiser 3 was not titled Hellraiser, right? If it was a new IP,
mhm.
it would be a really fun movie.
Oh, absolutely, yeah,
Uh, like you have this killer who kills people and he makes them into weird cyborg monsters.
yeah.
That's dope as shit. I
Oh yeah,
love
yeah. That's another thing. Distinctly, the Cenobites are like cyborg, like coded now in this one.
yeah. I love Camera Cenobite. I love DJ Cenobite. I love Flamethrower Bartender Cenobite, right?
Yeah.
But they aren't Cenobites. They aren't Hellraiser characters.
No.
And an extra kick in the nuts is taking Hellraiser, which was for two movies really nice, and having like the worst acting I've ever seen.
Oh, the acting is bad in this one. Yeah.
Yeah, like Pinhead is always a highlight. He's really good.
Mhm. Oh,
But
absolutely. Yeah.
everyone else, very
No,
bad.
not at all.
And like even to the marketing of like the opening credits, and it's like featuring a scene of Kirsty from the original two. Like, is that how you market this movie? One of
Yeah.
the guys is in it for two scenes.
Like, okay.
Okay, yeah, complete change of Pinhead as a character, complete change of the mythos. Pinhead creates Cenobites now instead of the Leviathan creating Cenobites. It's a
Mhm.
very easy procedure as opposed to a very difficult procedure. Uh,
Yeah.
Hell is very clearly the Christian hell,
Oh, yeah. Like, yeah.
and
Literally.
Christianity becomes a theme, which it was never a theme in the first two. There's a scene where Pinhead uh, crucifies himself with brainworm needles.
That scene was so like I did not see that coming. It's like the cover image I think on like maybe it's the cover image on the box. I can't remember. I saw that image and I was like,
Yes.
this looks like what I think it is. It's not right. And then I got into the movie, and he literally crucifies himself. It is. It's
Yeah, in front of a pastor.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, Pinhead becomes Satan, right? He becomes a Satan
does
allegory. He's tempting
yeah
people into setting him free, into doing, eating the forbidden fruit. He's massacring people in a nightclub. Pretty fun
yeah
scene, but it's not Pinhead.
yeah. And like the setup for this movie is so like fraught. Like I said earlier, like Pinhead is in a statue. He is in like this big like artistic pillar that um one of the characters like buys and is like taken by, like is like tempted by, and it's like Pinhead's face is in it and like is able to operate within the pillar, but uh he needs like victims. He needs like people to be tempted and like be taken in and then like get turned into Cenobites. It's
It's a
very
very comedic
weird.
setup,
It's
honestly. Like
yeah. In any
having
yeah.
having Pinhead just want people to come close to him.
That seems so
And
good. The guy there's a slimy guy who has the statue, and his ex girlfriend or whatever is like involved, and like the guy is stood next to this pillar and is so like obviously being suspicious, but he's like, oh, we're gonna make out, but like I need you to come to me, like it would be
I need you to
unfair if
stand
you
by the
didn't. Could
pillar.
you stand like in this space, could you stand on this red X underneath this big boulder, please? Like
Yeah.
it's so like I do agree, like if this wasn't a Hellraiser movie, this would be like an all-timer. Like it is so
Oh, it's so funny.
stupid. it's it's a ridiculous movie, and like yeah, Pinhead manages to break out of his like statue prison, and he is like distinctly a villain now. He goes to like the guy is a nightclub owner, so he leaves this back room where the nightclub manager is like living or like sleeping, um, and massacres the people in the nightclub in a very funny scene. Like that scene is incredibly funny. You get like lots of CG Pinhead um, killing people, and like it's all like set up for him to turn a bunch of guys into Cenobites. And like you said, there's a
Yes.
guy with CDs like buried in his head. There's a guy who I think gets like, does he get like a shot glass or something through the face, and like that's why his like his camera is. I can't remember what how exactly the camera guy's made. Um,
I don't think we see the camera
maybe
guy
we
get
don't.
killed, right?
Yeah.
Because it's her coworker,
Oh yeah, that's true.
and he
And then
goes there, and
there's
then the
like
next time we see him, he's a Cenobite.
there's like a fire guy. There is yeah. There's a bunch of Cenobites, and like I think one thing this series does manage to do is make some really funny Cenobite designs. Like the Cenobites have always been funny guys, like Chatterer and the fat
Yeah.
Cenobite. They're like classics,
Oh,
except that they're not
R.I.P.
in
to
these.
my guy, Fat Cenobite.
Yeah, they didn't bring them back. It's really fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah. Who's
Um,
your favorite Cenobite design?
fat Cenobite's really good. Chatterer obviously is classic. For the later movies, I do really like the twins. They're in it so little, but the twins in 4 are great.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um,
The twins were my favorite part of 4.
yeah, they should have
Like
been in it
in
more.
life as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're great. Like we oddly progressive as well.
Yeah, yeah. The fucking Da Vinci twins.
Oh my god, it's the Da Vinci twins. Yeah.
Going, would you, would you fuck a trans girl? And it's like pre or post op. Like post op. Yeah.
Ah,
It's like, oh shit.
for like 96, that's pretty progressive to have in a movie. Like
Yeah, it's like maybe Clive Barker was involved in this.
um, but yeah, like the Cenobites remain like a good thing, but like Pinhead is a very bizarre creature in that movie, and like the human Pinhead is like communicating with the main character to like, because like the girl who's the main character is like having dreams of like Vietnam, and which
Yes.
is all I think is meant to be the like human Pinhead trying to like reach the mortal realm and like defeat Pinhead.
Yes. So at the end of Hellraiser 2, Pinhead splits into a good Pinhead and a bad Pinhead.
Yeah,
That's an important part.
yeah,
Uh, and in Hellraiser 3, it's about good Pinhead trying to defeat bad Pinhead.
Uh huh.
Uh, and it's some really weird choices, right? Because her dad went missing in Vietnam.
Hmm.
So for half of the movie, I was under the impression that good Pinhead was her dad, but he's
Oh
not.
yeah, yeah.
They're completely unrelated, which is weird.
It's weird, yeah. And then like
uh,
yeah, at the end they like there's a very funny image of human Pinhead and Pinhead's like heads, like foreheads like bulging out and like
yeah,
connecting. It's very strange. Um like that like they defeat Pinhead this time, and that means nothing for Hellraiser 4. Hellraiser 4 can continue without ever like acknowledging Hellraiser 3 happened.
well, I think the big thing is that the good Pinhead and the bad Pinhead became one person again, right?
Yeah, like it solves
But there's
that.
no good left in him in the later movies.
Yeah,
He's back in hell is the big thing,
yeah.
and there's a big puzzle box building as well. She
Oh
buries the
yeah.
puzzle box in the concrete, and then we flash forward, and there's a puzzle box building, which to the credit of Hellraiser 4, the way that they made that work actually isn't that stupid. Or it's
That's
stupid,
pretty
but
good.
it's not insulting.
Yeah. So Hellraiser 3 is if you can in any way watch it without realizing it's a Hellraiser movie, it is a good time. If you're engaged with it in like as a Hellraiser movie, it's pretty dire. Um,
It's insulting.
borderline insulting. Yeah. Um, Hellraiser 4 um, has the ingenious setup of it being in space, only for it to cut very quickly away from space and reveal that it's actually going to take place over like multiple centuries of time, as it follows like I mean it's called Hellraiser Bloodline. It literally follows the bloodline of the person who made the first puzzle box in like 18th century France, um, all the way up to like the 22nd century. Um, and it's an odd movie. It's very distinctly made up of three sections, um, which means that there is like 90% setup for the entire movie because each section operates as like its own setup. It's kind of
Yeah.
a slog in that way. Like you'd think, oh, they've got three sections, things are going to move fast. They don't. They do not move fast at all.
It's
Um,
mainly exposition.
yeah,
I do respect the choice of having it in three different time periods.
it's definitely a cool idea.
Yeah, I do like that they threw in kills here and there, like the
Mhm.
Da Vinci twins, right? Uh, Stuff like that. I think it's weird that they introduce like a new demon queen only to relegate her to the sidelines halfway through the
Yeah.
movie. She was one of the coolest things, I think, that the
Mhm.
movie brought to the table. I think it's neat that they have Adam Scott in this movie. It's
Yes,
his first major film role, and
it was. Yeah,
it has ties and implications to Torque.
it
So
does. Yeah, yeah. So like the setup for this one is it's all based around like Pinhead wanting to get back into like fully get back into the mortal realm and like punish the bloodline of the person who made the puzzle box in the 18th century. So you start off in well, like chronologically, you start off in the 18th century, um, with like the person who made it for the first time. He's like hit on this big commission to make this funny puzzle box. He has very little idea, it seems, what it is he's made. Um, the guy who commissioned it is um, like he's working with Adam Scott, but he's like very knowledgeable of how hell works and how demons work.
yeah, he's an
Um,
evil wizard.
he's an evil wizard. The puzzle box gets opened, and Pinhead is here in this timeline. He kills the puzzle box maker, but his bloodline continues.
It's not Pinhead though. It's Jacqueline,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah. It's not Pinhead yet.
It should have been Pinhead.
Yeah.
Just fuck with the timeline while you're at it.
And then we jump forwards to like contemporary present day, um, with the guy who I guess it's insinuated is like behind the big puzzle box building.
Yeah, it came to him in a dream.
Yeah, and he's working on like a big puzzle box thing. He's like very secretive of it. You don't really get much information of what it is because this movie is three separate setups. He's building a big puzzle box. It's a building. It's pretty simple. Um, the the female demon uh knows where to find the puzzle box. She like goes down into the basement and like punches through a pillar and oh, here's the puzzle box. It's very silly. It was very much it feels like, oh, we need her to find the puzzle box. Where could it be? Oh, it's in a pillar.
Yeah.
It's in this pillar
And then
here.
she gets someone else to open the puzzle box.
Yeah,
Which is interesting because does that imply that if she opened it, Pinhead would have no choice but to kill her?
potentially, yeah. I don't know if they were thinking too much about it.
I
But
don't know
like
either. He's like, oh, my queen, I'm sorry, I must feed you to my weird dog.
the weird dog's good.
It's pretty cool.
So that timeline they managed to get Pinhead back, and then it does the same thing of oh now we need to punish the bloodline, so they go and they take the child hostage, the guy's child hostage, and in a very fraught sequence of events, um, oh wait, at some point in there, the twins who are like night guards come across all what's happening, and they get like their faces put into like a big like I don't even know what you'd call it. They get put in a big old trap, and they get like
Yeah, it's very weird.
melded together. It's a very funny.
It's one of the coolest kills. It's also probably the most uncomfortable kill.
Yeah, that looks like one of the Cenobites that's the most uncomfortable to be.
Oh, for sure. Do you think the Cenobites
I feel like they
feel the
must
pain of how
too.
they died?
I feel like they must do. I feel like that's probably like part of their like experience as demons is they are like constantly in the pain that they were in when they died.
Yeah. Do you think camera Cenobite is like, oh fuck, I got a camera in my face. Oh,
Probably.
it hurts.
This movie is like it's
It is
so
weird.
like I'm literally just explaining the plot, but that's all that happens is like
It's a very nothing
it's
movie.
all leading up to like the final moments that is like I guess like the payoff for the movie, but like you spend like an hour and 10 minutes not in space, only for the important stuff to happen like in the last 10 minutes of that scene. It is it is a movie about Pinhead going around and killing his blood like the bloodline, the people who made the puzzle box, which could be really cool. Like I think the time hopping and like
Hmm.
each each generation having to deal with a different like a Pinhead who has experienced each of the one that's come before and is like trying to like it knows exactly how to target like because the each generation of the puzzle box is a puzzle box maker is the same actor. It might as well be the same guy living another
Yes.
life. um, Very fraught in that way. Pinhead is just going around. His plan is to kill off the bloodline, and he keeps failing. Ultimately, they get
Yeah.
the guy's wife ends up like putting the Cenobites into the box, and like that's the end of that timeline. It jumps forward into space as we saw at the beginning, and in it, a scene I actually really like is the guy remotely opening the puzzle box. I think that's a really funny scene where like he's like got this robot in a facility on the other side of this spaceship. It looks like a Terminator robot opening the puzzle box. The robot succeeds and then explodes because like obviously whoever opens the puzzle box
Yeah.
dies. So in this case, the robot blows up, and there's a really good scene at the start of Pinhead like looking through the CCTV at the camera. Is like, well, and I need to kill like an actual person because like this robot like blue balled me. Um,
Yeah, Pinhead's dialogue is consistently like the best part of these movies.
Do I look like someone who cares what God thinks is so good?
Yeah, yeah, and like most iconic line of the entire franchise as well is "We have such sights to show you." That's also a banger.
Yeah. They bring it back, don't they? Don't they bring that back in that one? They're like, someone says, "We got some sights to show you." Yeah.
Yeah, the Demon Queen says it to
Oh,
Adam Scott.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think she doesn't have the same punch though.
There are very few horror franchises that have actually gone to space, which is surprising. You'd think everyone would be doing that. Like Leprechaun and Hellraiser both went to space the same year. I assume the Leprechaun movie takes place more in space. Um, I know like Critters 4 is a space-based one as well. Um, and then like Jason X, like the last, barring Freddy versus Jason, is the last Friday the 13th movie takes place in space, and it's still the goat for space sequels. It's still the one that like does the most with that premise and has the most fun with it. Um, Hellraiser in space would have been really
Yeah,
good, and hey, I guess that's what Paul W. S. Anderson was doing when he made Event Horizon like the next year after this movie, because like that is literally
this movie. Yeah, this movie increased my appreciation for Event Horizon.
because I was when I started watching it, I was like, wait, this is just like Event Horizon. I wonder if like this movie's why he made like why Event Horizon got made, and then I was like, oh wait, this movie takes place barely in space. This was definitely why Event Horizon got made.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's a lot of things that this movie could have done to be good. Uh, I think a Hellraiser
Yeah,
entirely in space could have been dope. I think what you were describing of like the blood rivalry, if they expanded on that, like
yeah, exactly.
JoJo's Bizarre
Yeah,
Adventure kind of situation, that could have been really fun. Uh, Instead, it's weird, right? Because they also have this like femme fatale character who's there. It feels like for no
yeah.
particular reason except that Pinhead didn't exist back then, which like they've retconned enough already.
You bringing up JoJo, that's a good comparison. Like Pinhead does become Dio. Pinhead is just Dio in this movie, and like
Yeah,
in the one before, like that is pretty good touchstone for what Pinhead becomes. He becomes Dio. He is like existing like uh beyond his means in that way.
yeah, and I think that could have been interesting, especially like if you want to play further into the
Yeah.
Christian imagery, having this like, oh, this is our
Hmm.
eternal nemesis, right? Pinhead, and we are the merchant family, and like a Castlevania thing as well. I guess it would be.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
totally.
Dracula keeps coming back, and we have
Yeah.
to fuck him up, right? Give
You
Pinhead a hot wife.
could.
Could
Like
do
yeah, I think
numbers.
I think JoJo is like a really good touchstone for what like the Hellraiser movies like try and be, at least in the 3 and 4. Um and they could have just like, this movie is difficult because like it's three separate sections. Each one has its own setup. So it is, as I said, it's like 90% setup. Even in the last 20 minutes, there is still like like the first 20 minutes of Alien, once they bring the xenomorph on board, like of like suspense. And it's like you're looking at
Hmm.
the clock and there is 10 minutes left of this movie, and like there are like no name characters getting killed off, and it's like, why is this suspense here? Just show us
Yeah,
like why we've been building up to space all this time. And it's so bizarre because like it leaves the reveal of the twins until then, and that is like a nothing. Like I mean, the kill's good, but like it's like a nothing moment. Like it's saved for like a no name like space marine um in the last 10 minutes of the
yeah.
movie. And then the last like 10 minutes of the movie are the 22nd century version of the toy maker and this random space marine woman who gets like a badass moment for some reason.
Well, because it's in space, you know, we have to
Exactly.
have our Ripley.
They trick Pinhead by getting beamed off the ship, that turns out to be a massive puzzle box that has been built, a massive space puzzle box that gets blown up, and that's the end of the movie. That, like, I imagine is meant to be like the end of
Yeah.
Pinhead's story again because he got blown up in space.
I
Looking
wish
at the six movies that came after it.
like this movie doesn't have an epilogue, which
Yeah.
at least lets me pretend it's
I
the
think
last one.
in your franchise, if you do the Pinhead dies three times thing where you can like feasibly end a franchise, you maybe need to like call it a day. Like even Elm Street, like Elm Street at least had a couple sequels that like tied into each other to like like add some finality. I feel like you can only do the like conclusive ending of a character so many times before it's like, yeah, maybe you need to put this franchise to bed.
Yeah, and especially like the second and the third one both do this, where they do the whole, oh, he's gone and dead forever. But is he really? And you have like the second one ends on the pillar coming up
Yeah,
from the mattress, with Pinhead's face stretched out, and the third one ends on the
yeah,
puzzle box building. And it's like, well, if you're gonna sequel bait, have a less
yeah.
definitive way of
Yeah,
getting
you
rid
can't
of
like
Pinhead.
seal him away and then blow him up into space. Like, I haven't seen the fifth movie, but I wonder
No,
how much that actually does tie in because I know it. I know the Cenobites were meant to be an afterthought in that movie, but I wonder if like it does try and continue on from four.
yeah, like if you're gonna do that, right? You can at least like have Pinhead be properly dead and then do like Mecha Pinhead.
Oh my god, they've got to do
Like at
that.
least give me that.
Yeah, it's it's so weird. As I said, like the Hellraiser sequels after this are like barely Hellraiser movies. They just like kind of like Pinhead's punishment, Pinhead's eternal punishment is that he's fated to show up for 2 minutes in like terrible movies that are somehow Pinhead Hellraiser movies. Like that's his like eternal punishment is that he'll show up in like a terrible Saw ripoff and will say something that like is vaguely a line he'd say in Hellraiser. And also there's a puzzle box that he's like bound to in some regard. Like in Hellworld, the puzzle box is like a website. It's like a website, like on the looking at the
God.
poster of Hellworld, you think it would like take place like in like a computer game or something. It does not. It takes place at like a stately home party. But the connection to the internet is that there's like an online invite thing that looks like the puzzle box, and if you press like enter, it will open the puzzle box to give you an invite.
Oh shit. I got a link to this website. It says
It is
fear.com.
basically fear.com. Movies.
Oh, movies. No. At least like I'm happy for the Pinhead actor, right? He shows up for
Yeah.
two
And
minutes, he
like
makes
for those
bank.
three movies that like were barely Hellraiser movies, he probably did like a total of like 3 days of filming. Like he probably made bank off that. Shout out to him. Uh,
Yeah. Shout out to he's the best thing about about everything post Hellraiser 2.
yeah. And even like he came back for like to do voice lines for Dead by Daylight when Pinhead got added. Like they added Pinhead with voice lines, who swiftly got the voice lines removed, and then they got Doug Bradley to redo the voice lines.
Wasn't that like the sex thing?
Yeah, like Pinhead says, like, you open the box and I came, and people made fun of the fact that he said I came, so they removed the voice lines. And they got Doug Bradley to do them. I think he still says I came, which is really funny.
That's so funny. That's taking a franchise that's literally about BDSM sex demon into your
Yeah.
PG-13. Yeah. Oh, well, that's the four first Hellraiser movies.
Hellraiser is a really fun concept, and like I think like because like Clive Barker's like continued the mythos himself. Like Scarlet Gospels came out like 2015, like, and it's is like a very weird movie because it starts off with like Pinhead as like this big as a villain, but specifically he's got beef with like wizards.
Isn't that the one where he fights Satan?
It is the one where he fights Satan. It starts off with like this group of wizards who are like who know that Pinhead is like gotten free and that is coming to kill people, coming to kill like wizards specifically, and like Pinhead like traps them and like tortures them. And then it cuts to there's like a repeat character that Clive Barker has. I can't remember. He's like a detective character who shows up in some of his works. Who's like the actual protagonist of that book, who through fraught means ends up opening the puzzle box and getting hunted down in hell by Pinhead. And at one point in the book, Pinhead is in hell and he sword fights Satan to like become the true leader of hell. It
That's
is
based.
it's a book that could have been like a third as long, but like as long as it includes that scene, I do not care. It's so good.
Yeah. I
um,
need to make time to read Hellbound Heart and its sequels at some point.
Hellbound Heart's good. Like
Yeah.
it's it's one of Clive Barker's best. Honestly, it's like you can tell it was such a meaningful thing to him.
Like, as much as Hellraiser 1 is a banger of a film, I know, like, reading up on it, that there were a lot of things that Barker wanted to include that he wasn't allowed to.
Hmm.
Uh, because, sensibilities. He wanted to have a
Yeah.
lot more, like, BDSM sex stuff.
Oh yeah, there is absolutely a
Which,
lot more of that in the book.
yeah. I've From what I've read, like, Pinhead and the Cenobites are way more overtly sexual
Mhm.
creatures,
Yeah, they are.
as opposed to just, like, we like hooking you with chains.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, like you mentioned, the sequel came out in 2015 or something. That's a
Yeah,
long time later. And
yeah,
like Barker uh, isn't the same person now as he was. He stated as much
definitely not. Yeah,
in several of his books and stuff. So I feel like we'll probably, or probably, we will never have the quote unquote proper Hellraiser sequel, I don't think.
no,
There's something sad about that, but at the same time, the original is strong enough to stand on its own, probably for all eternity.
yeah, to be fair, it's also like a Clive Barker franchise that like or a Clive Barker like story that got way more fleshed out than a lot of them were intended to be. Like I said, like
Oh
some of the
yeah,
biggest Clive Barker entities, like stuff like Rawhead Rex and Candyman and Midnight Meat Train, they were all like very short stories that were loosely adapted ultimately. And like
yeah,
Candyman is a classic. Like I can't really say the same about Rawhead Rex, and as much as I like Midnight Meat Train, it's certainly not a beloved classic. But like Hellbound Heart, like is a one of the most fleshed out of his like iconic stories.
yeah. I mean, I have to respect Clive Barker a lot as well because when he was unsatisfied with the way people were adapting his works,
Hmm.
he decided to do it himself.
Yeah.
Hellraiser was his directorial debut, I'm pretty sure,
Hmm.
and it's really good.
Yeah.
So big ups to Clive Barker. There's nothing he can't do.
He's great. I really enjoy reading Books of Blood. I think
Oh yeah,
he's got a really good mind for like fun concepts done well. I think at the very least the ideas he comes up with are like unlike any other horror writer
yeah. He's
of
so
his
creative.
time. Like him and like the same with like Stephen King. Stephen King writes a ton and like writes books no one else would, but like Clive Barker's like ideas are so like definitively his. Like and some of the stories he writes are nonsense. Like one of the Books of Blood 2 stories is about like a demon from hell running in the London Marathon because every generation they have to like Satan and a human champion have to race each other in the London Marathon to decide who gets to control Earth.
Hmm.
It's a bizarre story, but like it does work for like how Clive Barker does things. Or like in the first one we both like is about a demon trying to haunt a guy, but like the
Uh-huh.
guy is so like unhauntable that the demon starts going insane and like it's such a fun concept, but It's great.
Yeah, no, he's an incredible writer. Uh, we've mentioned as well, right? Like the things he does that are so different to what other horror franchises do. And I don't have a ton of experience with horror writers, right? But I can imagine
Mhm.
it's the same thing there, where he has this view on sex that
Mhm.
differs so much. Sex comes up a lot in his stories, and it's not usually portrayed as uh, it's often either portrayed as something that just happens,
Mhm.
or it's portrayed as uncomfortable in some way.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, attraction will have certain connotations that makes it seem less like a pleasant, nice thing, right? Love
Mhm.
isn't this object of great power. It's oftentimes this more uncomfortable kind of desire. Pig Blood Blues has a police
Mhm.
officer who tries to save a child, but it's
Yeah.
implied that the reason is because he is sexually attracted to the child.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um, in in the hills, the cities, you have two gay guys who just go at it from time to time.
Yeah.
Uh, Good for them.
Good for them.
um, the first one, titled "The Book of Blood," also has this weird connotation to its romance, where it's a an older woman who is trying to avoid her attraction towards this like fake psychic she's hired.
Uh huh.
Uh, but he's very much framed as being uh, his youth is very pronounced. He's described as having a body like a girl's. It's smooth and hairless, and
Mhm.
he's very much a twink, right? And it
Yeah.
comes across in this less of a romance and more of like a weird thing, especially at the end where he's very injured and she's the only one to take care of him. And at least in my read, that had some. It left a weird taste in my mouth.
Yeah.
It's not this
And
story
like,
of love persevering.
uh huh. Books of Blood is interesting. Like the first story, Books of Blood, is interesting because I think it came out. I think he read it just before he wrote Hellbound Heart, and there is a lot in that story that feels like proto Hellraiser, or at least how Hellbound Heart explores what the Cenobites do. It it is very much like kind of a grotesque like exploration of sex
Hmm.
and that kind of thing. It's very unpleasant, and it's certainly a way to start an anthology series. It is.
Yeah, no, I like it a lot, and I get
Mm-hmm.
what you mean as well with the similarities to Hellraiser, because it also has this kind of like, well, if you play with fate, this is
Mm-hmm.
what's gonna happen, right? In the same way as like, don't open the box if you don't want to get Pinhead on your ass.
Yeah.
Maybe don't be a fake psychic if you don't want the ghosts to get angry. It's the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, I like it a lot as well for how he often tries to describe things that are very difficult to describe with words, right?
Mm-hmm.
He does a very good job at describing this scene where the main character woman uh, can like simultaneously see the world as it is normally, but also like see through walls and shit.
Mm-hmm.
I would not be able to describe it in writing, but he does it very well.
He does it so well. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and like,
It's also like a thing of like I know people say this a lot about like people who write like transgressive stuff like this, but like just being able to write it, being able to like put it into words is so
oh,
fascinating.
for sure.
Like it's not. It is gratuitous, but like it's gratuitous in a way that is like there is real care put into like how like vulgar and how intrusive like the acts are. It's so yeah, there's just so much care put into it. It's really strange to say, but like it's not just being like edgy for the sake of being edgy.
Yes.
There's very deliberate like artistic statement being made in how he describes this like bodily desire. It is so interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Something we touch a lot on in me and Aska's podcast is that we've just happened to touch a lot upon because we both realize it's very important. But it is the concept of like
Mhm.
deliberateness, uh,
Mhm.
things done with a purpose. It any writer worth their salt can use big words, can use
Yeah,
euphemisms or metaphors or alliteration or anything else that can be used to reinforce your story, right? But
yeah,
the difference between it coming across as condescending or pretentious often lies in whether or not I can understand the purpose for its use.
yeah,
And with Clive Barker, 9 times out of 10, uh, I just am flabbergasted by his writing
yeah,
because not a word goes wasted, right? Not a description is off, not a comparison
yeah.
feels weird or unnecessary.
And like especially when you read, I know you haven't gotten to like Books of Blood Volume 2 yet, but that volume ends off on some of his most bizarre, like I think this is where he like kind of fails with some of his like sexual writing. Is he writes
Hmm.
there's a story called New Murders in the Rue Morgue, which for anyone familiar, like Edgar Allan Poe's Murder in the Rue Morgue is about this like locked room murder. um it is all revealed at the end that the pet orangutan of the people who died killed them. It's a very bizarre story, but New Murders in the Rue Morgue is about a horny monkey. It is
Yo.
it is ridiculous, especially in the same book that has like Dread, which I think is a very bizarre story, but it's like so intrinsically tied to like Clive Barker's like view on desire and bodily desire and that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
To end it on the horny monkey story is a move. It's certainly a move.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
Maybe we'll get to some of the Books of Blood 2 stories over the course of the miniseries, but
yeah, for sure. That's the thing with short stories as well is you can
yeah,
explore things that maybe you aren't good at yet. Uh
yes, absolutely.
like there is a lot of hit or miss in this like In the Hills That Cities is a big one that I think is
Mhm.
uh so interesting, right? In concept, he does a really
Yeah.
admirable job at like describing things and all that. Things that again that I would not even be able to consider how to describe. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna spoil it for any listeners, but
Mhm.
it's a really interesting story, and I think in the foreword of my book, there's someone who says like it challenges the notion that a horror story cannot be original, and I can see where they're coming from.
Mhm.
Uh, but I do think it fails occasionally in execution, uh,
Yeah.
which is fine, right? For a short story, you're not expecting a short story to be earth shattering.
Yeah, for
I think
sure.
it's admirable that he tried. I think it's
Mhm.
admirable that he gave it a shot, and he gave it a good shot as well.
It's also one of those stories that like will probably forever just exist in that story because I don't think anyone would ever try and adapt it.
No.
Uh, I do urge people like read Books of Blood. Books of Blood is great, but like read In the Hills of the Cities. Like I would maintain that it's one of the best like examples of like well visualized horror iconography
Yes.
in any horror. I don't think there is anything I've watched or read that has hit quite the way In the Hills the Cities has. And while the story itself, I think it there are interesting things there of like Balkan history and stuff, and like how like the Balkan Wars have really shaped that part of the world. But like the specific imagery in that story is unlike anything I've ever read, and I really urge anyone to give it a read. Like it's so fascinating.
Yes, I agree for sure. Uh, and then also like the thing you mentioned, it doesn't feel edgy. It feels deliberate. And
Mhm.
in the first story, the Book of Blood, you have these descriptions of where the ghosts are basically carving stuff into him. Right, he's becoming the live Book
Mhm.
of Blood that I am implied to be reading from. And
Yeah,
it says like they are carving into his phallus. They are carving into, the
yeah.
inside of his buttocks.
Hmm.
These things that are very visceral, very uncomfortable. But it doesn't feel like he's doing it in a way to be like, oh, isn't this so fucked up? Isn't
Yeah.
it? Oh, aren't you disgusted right now? It feels like, yeah, this is Clive Barker's way of writing.
God, imagine if you got like chained up by demons and they wrote the horny monkey story on your cock.
Imagine if that's
Like,
the one they put on your cock. That's like,
you go through like your like eternity of torture, and it's like you get through the second volume of these books, and it's like, oh, have you got to write the horny monkey
yeah,
story? Like, can you just skip that one? Like, you wrote better stories. Come on, like let's skip the horny monkey
like,
story.
can't you put that one at least somewhere else, right? Like
Yeah.
in my armpit, back of my
Yeah.
knee, right? Can't you put like mid? Oh, if Midnight Meat Train isn't on his dick, that's a huge waste.
Yeah, exactly. That's the first story too. So
Yeah,
like, yeah,
maybe that's
that's
where they started.
prime.
Oh, I'm gonna get the Midnight Meat Train tattooed on my cock and balls. People are gonna love that.
But yeah, we'll definitely explore more books of blood stuff,
Oh,
and
for
if
sure.
there are any other short stories like this mini series it's about the kind of crustier parts of his adaptions, but like we're certainly going to get to Midnight Meat Train the movie because I love that movie a lot, but it's got certainly some choices. Um, but we will definitely get some into his like writing because like he's just so good. He's so good. I love his
He is
work
so
so
good.
much. Um, there are some real gems of stories in the first two volumes of Books of Blood, and I certainly got to knuckle down and read some of the others.
Yeah.
And play his video games. He made video games.
He
Like
what?
there are Clive Barker video games. Yeah,
That he made?
he had a hand in. I don't know quite how much he made them, but like there are Clive Barker's game video games. I think one of them's on Steam. I might have to download that
Oh, that
and
has
play
to
it.
be an ECC stream for sure.
Oh yeah, I might actually do that.
Yeah.
We'll plan that. Um, but yeah, we will delve more into his back catalog and some of the weirder parts, I'm sure. But we both have a lot of appreciation for what he does, and we've got some interesting movies lined up as well that we can get to. But I think that probably wraps up our Hellraiser discussion and our Book of Blood discussion for sure.
Yep.
Um, Carl, what have you got going on? What's happening with Cinema Crash?
Oh, well, funny that you should ask. My podcast, the Cinema Crash podcast, are currently doing a look into Mika Ninagawa. Uh, one of, I would say, one of the Japanese directors of all time.
One
One
of.
of them. Uh, we have been going through her filmography bit by bit. Currently on we're currently on her final work, No Longer Human.
Mhm.
So that's going to be uploaded pretty soon. Yeah, we just go through her movies bit by bit, trying to figure out her specific Ninagawa isms. She's a very visual
Mhm.
director. She's a lot of fun to talk about and watch movies of. And if any of this sounds interesting to you, or if you just have an interest in hearing people talk about movies, I would urge you to check us out. We're on anywhere that you're listening to this podcast, as well as on YouTube.
Yeah, it's a really good podcast. I have guested on two now. We did a Blair Witch one that will be up at some point.
Oh yeah, that's coming
Um,
out soon as well.
That's yeah. This is basically just a three-person Exorcist Cinema Club. How it ended up being. It's just all It's it's about Blair Witch. We all had a lot of fun talking about Blair Witch. There is a podcast up currently where you and me just talk about horror movies. That is also a very fun one to do. And like any of the podcasts the guys have done have been really good. So definitely check it out. They've got some on like classic Japanese cinema if that's what interests you. Um, and I'm sure they've got lots of interesting stuff planned.
Yeah, for sure. We are planning eventually doing like a follow up to the Japanese film history episode. It's
Oh,
just
nice.
really difficult to find the time for it.
Yeah. But yeah, I will leave it there. You can find Extra Cinema Club on Twitter at Extra Cinema Pod. There is a Ko-Fi link of the same address, and you can find any of my other links there as well. Thank you everyone for listening. I'll see you next time.
Yeah, bye.